Hello, Dr. Vikki Petersen here. This week has been a very exciting week for those of us involved with the gluten community, and that is the Gluten Summit has been going on. And this is a week-long event, and if you haven't heard about it, you can definitely still go online and listen in, plus get transcripts of those speakers you've missed. And it's extremely exciting. It's hosted by a dear friend of mine, Dr. Tom O'Brien. Many of you have watched our gluten sensitivity and celiac forum live or the DVDs. You would have seen Dr. O'Brien in each and every one of the forums that we've had. So he's not only a dear friend, but he's very brilliant and very committed to the gluten-free community. So he's hosting this e-summit this whole week, and there's many speakers. And what I wanted to do was just kind of help maybe explain some of the more difficult speakers. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about a discussion that Dr. O'Brien had with Dr. Vojdani, and he is a world-renowned immunologist, meaning an expert on the immune system. I've also had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Vojdani from seminars for many years, and he spoke a lot about the autoimmune disease issue and how it relates to the immune system, of course, and how it relates to gluten. I'm happy to say that nothing I have said in prior videos was contradicted by Dr. Vojdani. I definitely learned some things, and I wanted to share those with you, but I was happy to see that everything thus far has been very accurate, meaning I've been a good student of his, and of course of research that's come out over the years. But there's definitely a lot of misunderstandings about autoimmune disease, and I think they stem from our traditional medical model that talks about autoimmune disease as just an immune system out of control. There's really nothing you can do. Patients are put on immunosuppressive drugs, which are very dangerous, can be life-threatening, and we're sort of stuck in that model that it's nothing, there's nothing you can do about it. And really nothing could be farther from the truth in many cases. Certainly autoimmune diseases can go to a degree that there isn't anything you can do. But for many people, especially those that are in the reactive state, meaning not even full-blown disease, there's a tremendous amount you can do. It's very linked to gluten, very linked to the gut. And so I wanted to share some of that with you today. I'm going to be looking down at my notes a little bit, so if you see my eyes go downward, that's why. There's a lot of information. It was an hour-long interview, and I'm going to just synopsize it for you. So one of the things that the doctor talked about was skin prick tests, also called scratch tests, and how these are tests that have been around for 120 years, and they're not accurate for foods, which is something I've always said. They're really accurate for inhalants, so things you can inhale in your environment, cats and dogs and plants and things like that, more not things you're ingesting or eating. So if you're suspicious of a true allergy, and that's mediated, meaning it's created by a part of your immune system called IgE. Sometimes the way people remember that is E for emergency. These are the peanut allergies, or those allergies that have a very fast response. Those type of true allergies, gluten is not a true allergy, it's a sensitivity. But for a true allergy, if your doctor says, I'm suspicious of a food allergy and I want to do a scratch test, tell him you'd prefer to do a blood test because it's much more accurate, okay? And it's kind of a miserable thing to go through. Now, if you're suspecting inhalant allergies like cats and dogs and plants and things like that, fine, then you can do the scratch test. But it's not accurate for food, so you can know that. Talked a lot about the fact that when it comes to food, it's not normal to react to food. But when the body does react to food, then what happens is another line of defense. We talked about the IgE, standing for emergency, and it's very quick. There's IgA, so the first line, so think of the first place the food goes is in your mouth and in your gut, so letter A right at the beginning of the alphabet. So IgA is the part of the immune system that would react to the food, and the whole idea of that is that the IgA is found in the gut, and it would attack the food and excrete it from the system and not allow it to get into the body. It's funny, we don't think about our gut is inside as far as we can't see it, but it's really outside the body because there's a tube from the mouth, to the other end, and it's not really, nothing gets in as far as to the bloodstream of the body until it passes through that lining of the intestines. So really the digestive tract, like the skin, is on the outside. And so this IgA is housed in the gut. Its design is to attack something and then just take it out of the system and not allow it entrance. Unfortunately, when you're having a food reaction, that attack, if you will, of that IgA against the food happens along the lining, and because of that inflammation of that attack happening, then we get a leaky gut. So then all of a sudden things are passing through that shouldn't be allowed to pass through. So that's where you get these food particles sort of passing through, and now you've gotten into the bloodstream, and now other parts of your immune system get involved. And those immune particles can have a delayed response. So there's IgG, there's IgM. They have a delay in their response, and that delay can be up to 1 to 2 weeks. Now this was something new for me. I usually say anywhere from hours up to 4 days, but Dr. Vojdani said that reaction can be up to 1 or 2 weeks, which is definitely longer than I thought. So that was one thing that I learned. Let's see, what else did we have here? Also, once that food does leave the intestine and gets out into the bloodstream and the immune system there is attacking it, it creates something called a complement. You don't really need to know the mechanism of that so much as to know that that complement compound, if you will, is very pathogenic and very inflammatory. Pathogenic means something that causes disease, and inflammation, we know, is something that creates disease. So now we do have the fact that a food reaction is creating disease. He said it's the most pathogenic and inflammatory molecule the body makes. So that was pretty intense. And for people who say, oh, it's food, what can it do? Well, it can create disease. So very, very clear from Dr. Vojdani on that. The next thing they talked about was our testing for celiac disease and the problems with it, and the fact that it's a big protein, and it can be broken down into what's called peptides, which are just small strings of amino acids. And the most common one that's tested for in celiac testing is called alpha-gliadin. The name's not that important. Just know that there's just one peptide that's most commonly tested for, and that's fine because 50% of celiacs do show positive to that particular peptide, alpha-gliadin, but that means 50% don't, right? So you're talking about half the population of celiacs don't show positive to that particular part of the molecule. And what we know is that there are many, many peptides that are part of the gluten molecule that don't get tested for. Now, you've heard me mention in the past perhaps about Cyrex Labs, and that's a newer lab on the scene. It's a few years old now, but they test for a multitude of different peptides of the gluten molecule. And we were very excited when they came on the scene several years ago because we realized we would have a more effective look, and we would have other ways to really find individuals who are suffering either celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. So he also reiterated the importance of that. Plus the fact that the current testing for celiac disease, the tests are extremely accurate at end stage celiac. And you know with celiac what happens is the little finger-like projections of a healthy lining of the intestine kind of get mowed down. Dr. O'Brien likes to call it the carpeting. The shag carpeting becomes Berber, flat carpeting. So that's the way he refers to it. But that's unhealthy when you go to Berber. It should be like a shag. And this happens in celiacs, and it's only when that end stage has occurred where you've really lost that healthy lining of the intestinal tract that the celiac blood tests are truly accurate, which is not what you want, obviously. You want to detect this disease as early as possible, just the way you want to detect any disease. So the next thing that they talked about was very, very interesting, and maybe you've experienced this if you've been gluten-free and you've either cheated knowingly or you've gotten into some gluten unwittingly. Why is it that you can have eaten gluten maybe most of your life and, you know, maybe didn't enjoy the best of health and then got off gluten, felt better, and then cheated, or as I said, you know, unwittingly got into a little bit of something and whoa, you know, all heck broke loose. And I've so often had patients come in and say, why is my body freaking out to that degree with something I used to eat not only every day of my life, but several times a day, and never had that kind of reaction? And it really goes down to immunology, or understanding the immune system, and the fact that your body, when it's initially exposed to a food, needs a bit of food. And Dr. Vojdani said when it came to wheat, it was equivalent to a kernel of wheat, so certainly not a lot, but that on secondary exposure or follow-up exposure, 1/1000th of a kernel of wheat is all that it would take. And that's why and not only did it take less, but that the response was multifold larger because of something called memory cells of the immune system. And those cells literally remember, and they're just waiting to have a response, and they can have a very dramatic response. So not only does that explain the mystery of why you feel so much worse when you get into it subsequently, it also explains why we say to never, ever, ever reintroduce gluten just to do a test, because that mammoth response that occurs from your immune system is actually enough to initiate autoimmune disease, something very serious that maybe you can't come back from successfully, or certainly it's going to take a lot of effort to do so. So I liken reintroducing gluten like playing Russian roulette. As you know, that's a loaded gun, and it is really that serious, because it could definitely be life-threatening, so I don't even consider it much of an exaggeration, to be honest with you. Talked about that, and then also talked about the fact that when you reintroduce, whether it's as I said, a causative reintroduction, something you're deciding to do, or maybe just an oops, and you unwittingly get into some, sometimes the reaction is a different reaction. So say you were somebody who, whenever you ate gluten, you just got bloated and then had diarrhea, or you had a headache. Well, maybe after you've been away from it for a while and you reintroduce it, you get a very different reaction, like inflammation in the brain. You know, something, your thyroid starts breaking down. Something you can't feel, you see? It's not like, oh, my head hurts, or oh, I'm running to the bathroom. It's a reaction you cannot feel, which is dangerous. It's common. I mean, this happens, but what's dangerous about it is then people go, oh, I think I'm okay. Let me cheat more, right? And then the next thing you know, you have a full-blown autoimmune disease. So these are all things mostly things I've talked about before, but as I said, it was really great to hear them completely supported by this world-renowned expert, plus there was definitely some new things as I've mentioned thus far. So the real key, what it came down to with the autoimmune disease, was removing the trigger, because it's that trigger that's keeping that immune system going and causing the damage, right? So we've talked about the fact in autoimmune disease, of course, what the word means is your immune system is attacking you. Why is it doing that? Not because it's doing it knowingly, it's because it's confused, and it thinks what it's attacking is something that formerly, it is considered something bad. So, like gluten, your immune system said, bad, I don't like gluten, that's a toxin for me, right? And then, subsequently, what happened because of the leaky gut and the fact that the gluten leaves the intestine and gets out into the bloodstream, now you have the bloodstream's immune system attacking the gluten, and sadly, the protein gluten looks a lot like proteins found throughout the body. So now you have the immune system going, oh, thyroid, that looks like it, let's attack it. Oh, liver, oh, joints, oh, brain cells, you see? These things look a lot like gluten from their protein structure, and that is an initiation, how autoimmune disease can initiate. So of course what you want to do is take away the trigger. And what Dr. Vojdani talked about is the earlier you take away the trigger, of course, the better. Because if you're in that initiation stage, or the autoimmune, he called it the autoimmune reactive stage. So not full-blown autoimmune yet, but the body's definitely headed in that direction, and it's starting to attack the tissue. So early stage, in other words. So attacking in the early stage, you could really bring somebody completely back from it. But what Dr. O'Brien pointed out was there's plenty of research to show people with full-blown autoimmune who have been brought back from it, which is something I've said before, and certainly things that we see here at the clinic. So very, very exciting. I definitely urge you to visit the Gluten Summit if you haven't thus far, and just throngs of amazing people who have done amazing work and continue to do so, and are interviewed by Dr. Tom O'Brien, and he does a fabulous job of interviewing them. But those who I think you know, maybe are a little scientific, I will do my best to kind of simplify it for you. Plus, this is a lot shorter than listening to an hour. Definitely best to listen, but as I said, if you don't have the time, or the simplicity is a little bit easier to digest, then I hope this was helpful. And as I said, it very much corroborates what we see here at the clinic with autoimmune disease and with gluten, as well as what we've talked about before. So I hope this was helpful to you, and please send me your questions. I always do love to hear from you. And until next time, I wish you very good health.